encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. If you want to be a serious Bible student, a successful servant, and a powerful preacher, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome to Preachers in Training. My name is Robert Hatfield, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things preaching and ministry. I'm excited about today's episode. On occasion, we maybe geek out just a little bit, but for most of us, technology has become a non-negotiable in terms of the way that we prepare for sermons, certainly in our Bible study. We've had episodes before where we've discussed maybe the pros and cons of different Bible software. And today we're going to focus in on one of those, and that's going to be Logos. And so I'm really excited about that. Here to help us discuss this topic today is Michael Hite, who joins us from the Bear Valley Bible Institute in Denver, Colorado. I guess technically you join us from home, but they're one and the same these days, aren't they?
Yeah, with our COVID restrictions, home is where the books are and the office is and everything else is. So yeah, we're working from home these days. But.
Gotcha. WeTrainPreachers.com for more information about the work there that you all do. And I greatly appreciate the work that in which you all are involved and have followed it, albeit from a distance, for some time. And thanks for what you do. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's a work of passion we all love. And feel very strongly about the need to train preachers. The Brotherhood always needs more preachers, and so it's a work that we're really passionate about. And we're to the point now where we have 45 schools in 28 countries.
Wow!
And so we're training preachers all over the world, which is a great opportunity.
That's fantastic. I know Keith Kasarjan is traveling like crazy. So.
Yep. Keith is our director of our extension program, and so he travels all over the world and finds new places. And once we open those schools, we train men in their local cultures to evangelize and preach to their local cultures. And we find obviously that they're far more effective in that ministry than we could be. So it works out really well.
We're talking today about Logos Bible software, and in doing so, perhaps we're alienating a good majority of the audience. I'm not sure. Logos is right on up there in terms of Bible softwares, in terms of the number of users that it has, and so I'm hopeful that by hosting a podcast about this particular topic that will include a lot of people. We've had, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, some episodes before. In fact, I think maybe you've been on before to talk about Logos, and we've compared and contrasted that with some others. How long have you been using Logos, and why is it your software of choice as we get started today?
Well, I don't want to say how long I've been using it because that's going to date me. I actually, this is the truth. I actually found a box with my install floppy disks the other day.
Oh, wow.
If that gives you some idea of how long I've been using Logos, it's probably pushing 30 years.
30 years?
25 maybe. Going back to one of the early versions that installed with about 25 little floppy disks. So, the reason I think I like Logos so much is because of the work you can do in the original languages, but from the English text. I do a lot of exegetical work in the original languages, but I'm not proficient at translating on the fly, just looking at the Greek text as some are, the Hebrew text. And Logos provides that bridge that allows me to get to the original languages, but do that through the English. And that's somewhat unique in the software world. Most of the other softwares require you to start with an original language text to do that work. But Logos has manufactured these reverse interlinears that really let you do that from the English. And so I really like that. The other issue too is that any of that work that I do in the English language, the original language, migrates to whatever version I happen to be looking at. So
Which
if I
is
do
fantastic.
some underlying,
Yeah.
it really is. If I do some underlying work in the Greek and the New American Standard, that same work is available in the ESV or the New King James or the King James. And it really allows some versatility that other packages don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there's a financial investment that's involved in
There
something
is.
like this. There's also a learning curve. I mean, and that's true, I guess, with any software, but it's complicated, which is helpful, but you got to master the craft, right?
It is. It's something that you invest both financially in, but also time and learning. There are a lot of great resources out there. Logos' own website does a great job of providing short little videos that can help you get started. There's some other online resources as well that will give you training, if you will. But it is something that you have to invest in, like anything else. It's a deep program. Sometimes some would argue it's not particularly user-friendly, but the tools are extremely powerful, and if you invest the time, it really pays off.
Yeah. I've used especially the first part of COVID when it first hit and everybody, the whole world shut down for a little while. I thought, I'm going to go through the Logos website, and I went through all their tutorials and I took notes and I learned so much, and some of it stuck and I need to go back and do it again. But it was a wonderful time to sort of reinvest that time aspect into the software. It was really cool.
It is. And, those little videos, one of the things I love that they've done is their training videos are all like 3 to 7 minutes.
Yes.
It's never, okay, here's a 45-minute video on this. And I really like the little snippets of information because you can kind of take a bite and then chew on it for a while and then take another bite and chew on it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like how they've done that. I think that's a good way to try to learn this program.
Yeah, absolutely. So one more question before we're going to talk about your favorite features of Logos. I'm interested though in whether Logos and particularly the digital library is replacing your physical library for you. Are you a physical book guy, digital book guy, or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I'm pretty all in with the digital books. I have books that are not available in Logos. There's a lot of Brotherhood material that's not available in Logos. And so I still have a lot of physical books. But again, as I travel, to be able to take my entire theological library with me wherever I go in my laptop has been a game changer.
Yes.
I do mission work. As I mentioned, we've got schools all over the world, and I've traveled regularly to Cambodia and to Tanzania and a number of places. And to be at 30,000 feet for 15 hours and have access to my entire theological library on the airplane while I travel is a super game changer. I mean, it's hard to go back to paper books after that.
I agree with you. And it was Logos that I think made the switch for me. It sort of is convincing me of the value of, I've known the value of digital books, and it's obvious, and I've got sort of a mixture, but wow, it's pretty cool.
Even with COVID, again, the Bear Valley Bible Institute, we were all forced into our homes to teach from. And so, all of my books are at my office across town. To haul all of those home and set them up would have been terrible, but I've got them in Logos, and I just take my laptop home and my library goes with me. So it works out very well.
Gotta plug just real quick the digital app too. Logos has a really good mobile app is what I meant to say. And particularly I have an iPad Pro and I love it. Just highlighting and making notes in that form is nice. It's really easy to do on the desktop version, and I guess that's my preference, but it's nice when you're on the road and on the go to be able to pull that stuff up. It's just great.
Is. I do want one little disclaimer for our listeners, and that is some people you do need to understand that the mobile version is a much more reduced feature set than the desktop version. And some people think, well, I'm not going to invest the money in the desktop. I'm just going to get the mobile app and I have Logos. It's not exactly true. And some of what we're going to talk about today, as a matter of fact, a lot of my favorite features are only going to be available in the desktop version, not the mobile app. So The real power features are in the desktop version, but the mobile app is great to highlight things and underline things. And then when you go back to the desktop, that's already highlighted and underlined.
Yes.
It makes it great for taking notes and doing that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. All right. I guess we better get into it. We were talking about your five favorite Logos features as you shake your head while I introduce the topic.
And we talked about this, but this is like trying to ask me which is my favorite child. Of all the movies that have ever been created, what are the five best movies that have ever been made? It's like I could narrow it down to 50, but forcing me to 5 is evil at some level. But we'll do our best. We'll do our best.
Oh, that's the quote we're going to share from this episode. Is just evil.
That'll be the title of this episode.
Yes, that's exactly right. So, for those of you who are watching today, I think that we're going to have a visual component to this. For if you're listening to this, by all means, keep running or driving or whatever you're doing, and maybe the audio cues will be helpful to you to sort of understand exactly what we're talking about here. But I want to encourage you to go over to the YouTube channel, search for The Light Network. Preachers in Training Season 13, Episode 4 is what you're looking for, the episode about the top 5 features of Logos. So where do we begin today?
Well, I tried to break this down in a couple of different ways. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was start with some simple things that are maybe not necessarily my favorite features, but ones that I think some people don't know much about.
Oh, okay.
And some real powerful little tips and tricks. And one of them is just in preferences. If you go into the program settings, and there's a number of ways to get to those, but usually in the upper right-hand corner of the software, there's 3 little dots. Those little menus gave you access to all kinds of stuff. And one of them is in program settings. You have the ability to control what happens when you just double click on a word or triple click on a word. And I think a lot of users don't know that they can customize that. And it really, I know it sounds like a very simple thing, but it's really a very powerful thing. And when you go into the software and you go down into the section on text display, you have a double click action and a triple click action. And I have mine set up so that my double click action is to look up the word, and the triple click action is to search for the word. Now, both of these are also connected to a setting called Prefer Lemmas. And it's just a couple of choices down from there. And you need to make sure Prefer Lemmas is yes. As long as you have those 3 things set, you can do some really cool stuff in the text. One of which is whenever you have a Bible open, and I'm just going to go ahead and get a New American Standard open here. What this allows you to do is simply, whenever there's a word on the screen, for example, I'm here in Luke 22:31, this idea of Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. If I double click on the word demanded, it opens my lexicon and gives me the definition. My preferred lexicon is BDAG. It's one that most preachers are going to be very familiar with. And all I have to do is double click on the word and it opens the definition in BDAG. So I don't have to do anything fancy, just double click. If I triple click on the word, it does a search for that word everywhere in the New Testament. And will show me, in this case, there's only one occurrence of that particular word. So it's a unique word in the New Testament, which is fascinating. So those 2 things I do 100 times a day. What does the word mean? Where else does it appear? And just by making those 2 changes, double click once, I get to the meaning, double click, triple click, I get to a search of everywhere that word occurs.
That's really cool stuff. And it's showing you it's a Greek search, right? It's showing you the search for the lemma there.
It's doing, for those of you that are roughly my age, You may remember an old resource called the Englishman's Greek Concordance. And as a matter of fact, when Logos first started this, they called that the Englishman's Search because it replicated that print resource, the Englishman's Greek Concordance. And so what I really love about that lemma search, when you triple click, is as long as you use the aligned feature in that search to organize it, it lines up all of the words in one column, and you can see all the different ways that word is being translated throughout the text. And that is the layout that the old Englishman's Greek Concordance used to use in the print version. And so it really gives you the scope of the word across the entire New Testament, which really can show you the variety of ways translators chose to translate that word, and gives you a better sense of what it means.
That's really powerful. And, you get used to these gestures, the double click, the triple click. It becomes second nature to you once you get it down after a while.
It really does. As a matter of fact, sometimes when I teach, I have to be reminded, okay, what did I just do to make that happen? Because the students don't necessarily know. But yeah, and a lot of people just don't know that they can customize those. There are other choices in that program settings menu. But if you set the double click to look up and the triple click to search, you've got it set up, and you can really get to the information you need as quickly as you need it. And again, I must do that a dozen times getting ready for a Bible class or prepping a sermon. I'm always looking for, what does this word mean? Where else does it appear, and how's it being translated? And so making those two so easy to get to is a real power feature.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can do the same thing by right-clicking or control-clicking, but you have to make sure the right thing is selected, the English word versus the Greek term. And
I know,
yeah.
I used to love the right-click menu, and the right-click menu is extremely powerful.
It is.
I really think I think it was in version 8, it might have been when version 9 came out, they really made it far more complicated than it used to be. And in some ways, I think the right-click menu is harder to use than it used to be. It's still got a lot of power, there's no doubt, more power than it had before. It's just a little bit harder to navigate. And there's times when I just want to double-click on a word and see what the lexicon says.
Yes.
I don't want to have to navigate all the complexity of that right-click menu. And so it just makes it quick and easy. And you like you said, you build that muscle memory so fast that it just becomes a routine thing to do.
Yeah. Okay, so that's in the program settings area on the double and triple click. Very good.
There you go.
All right, so that was number one. Where shall we go next?
Well, the other one that I want to talk about is the new fact book. Fact book has really become a key feature in Logos 9. If you've upgraded to Logos 9, they've really integrated the fact book throughout the software in very powerful ways. But in version 8 and version 9, they added a feature of the fact book that goes missing for a lot of folks. And that is the ability to get the background of a Bible book from the fact book. And what I mean by that is when we go to study something, if I'm going to study, for example, Galatians, there is a set of questions that we always need to ask, right? Who's the author? When did they write? Who did they write to? Maybe see an outline of the book, some background information before we just jump into a verse to start. And many preachers are familiar with most Bible books and can do that on the fly, but there are times when we want a refresher on that kind of stuff. And if you use the fact book and you type in the name of the Bible book you're studying, for example, if I choose Galatians and select the epistle to the Galatians, and it'll usually show you that it is the Bible book when you type it into the fact book and click on it. There's a section now that, in addition to features and everything else, called the Bible Book Guide. And what the Bible Book Guide does is it searches your entire library and it finds articles that answer all of those questions. For example, if I look at content, the content section, it gives me an overview of the book. It presents me with outlines of the book, and it will talk about the contents of the book. If I look at the next section in origin, it gives me articles on the authorship of the book, articles on the date of the book, and articles on the purpose of that particular writing. And then background will give me some historical context for that book, the recipients, and the location of the writing. So all of those questions that we typically ask, who's writing, who were they writing to, when did they write, why were they writing, where did they write from, are all answered for me in this fact book analysis of each Bible book. And it really is a great way to be reminded of some of that material, and it's all right there at your fingertips.
Absolutely. It is so clear that Logos has been made with preachers in mind. It's just,
yeah, it really is.
Features like this are just outstanding.
They are, and so powerful. And, the ability for, one of the ways I describe Logos is that you bought a library and you downloaded all your books, but the last thing that you downloaded was a librarian that interfaces with all those books for you. And some people ask me, why is a digital library so valuable? Well, try with your paper books to find all of the articles on the origin of the Galatian epistle. How long is it going to take you to find all the books in your paper library that have an article that talks about the audience segment of the Galatian epistle? And where are those, and how are you going to get to them? Well, all I did was type in epistle to the Galatians, and it's all right here. I mean, all I got to do is click on it, and here's a link to, the Word Biblical Commentary on the authorship of Galatians. And it took me 2 seconds to get to, along with all of these others that are right here with bookmarks in them, ready for me to turn to that page and read and do the background material search that I need to do. So,
yeah, that's fantastic. So you mentioned, if I can sidebar a minute, you mentioned Logos 9.
Yes.
If somebody's on 8, should they upgrade? I'm sure that's on somebody's mind right now as they're listening to this.
Yes, but you need to understand, and Logos doesn't like when I do this, but you need to understand that you do not have to upgrade your library to upgrade to the newest version of the software. Logos really does, Logos is at its heart a publishing company. A publishing company's job is to sell you more books, right? But you don't necessarily have to buy more books in order to use the new features. One of the things that you want to look for after they release a new edition is called a cross grade. Rather than a library upgrade, you want a feature cross grade. And what that does is that gives you all the new features and all the new data sets without necessarily adding a ton of new books to your library. So,
they don't make this abundantly obvious.
They don't. And I get it. They would love for you to spend $350, $400 more to get more books from them. I mean, they are a company that's trying to stay in business just like everybody else. But it is out there. You can find the cross grades features available. And usually the cross grade is somewhere between $100 and $150, depending on your library and how many new features they add. So I haven't bought a library upgrade in years, but I do upgrade, to the major feature sets every year. And I think this one is worth it. I think 9 has some great resources in it that's worth it if you spend the $150. Now, again, I don't think you have to upgrade your library from gold to platinum and add 500 new books to your library. That's your call. If you want to do that, that's great. But for about $150, you can upgrade to the latest feature set and get all the data sets you need and take advantage of the new tools. And that's really what I'm more interested in than adding more books to my library.
Gotcha. All right. The cross grade, something good to keep in mind there. Okay, so the fact book, you got to check out the fact book, and you're right, it is so powerful, and I love that.
And check it out specifically. Type in the name of a Bible book, and then use that Bible book guide section to fact book. You can look up anything, any topic you can think of, but when you do a Bible book, it adds that Bible book guide section that leads you through all that background material.
Gotcha. Okay. So that was number 2, if my count is correct. We are flying through these today.
Well, we're about to come to a screeching halt.
That's good. All right, I'm excited. Let's dig in.
The next one I'm going to admit up front that I'm cheating.
Okay.
The next one is a category of tools, not a tool. And that allows me to talk about a few different tools in the category. I promise I'll be brief. But there's a category of tools called interactives. And these interactive tools are extremely powerful, but they're off the beaten track in Logos a little bit. And like anything else that's hidden in your computer, if you don't know it's there, you don't necessarily take advantage of it, right? And if you go to the tools menu in the top of the interface and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you're going to find a section called Interactive Media. And interactives are these Bible programs inside Logos that let you do a variety of things. One of my favorites is called New Testament Use of the Old Testament. And when you open it, it gives you this faceted menu that allows you to see what books are being quoted, what Old Testament books are being quoted in what New Testament books, who's quoting them. There's all kinds of filtering that you can do to narrow it down. But the left-hand side of the tool is this faceted filtering, is what Logos calls it. For example, if I'm studying the Gospel of Mark, I can choose Mark as my book, and then I can see all of the Old Testament passages that are being quoted or alluded to or echoed in the Gospel of Mark. For example, this tells me immediately that Isaiah is used 17 times in the Gospel of Mark. Well, where? And if I click on it, it's going to show me all of the quotations and allusions and echoes to passages in Isaiah that are used throughout Mark's Gospel. Really powerful when we understand that you really can't understand the New Testament without at least a connection to the Old Testament. So much of the Old Testament is being used in the New Testament that we need that bridge that tells us, okay, where is this information coming from? And allows us then to go look at Isaiah and study that passage in Isaiah and then understand how or why Jesus might be quoting from it, or Peter might be quoting from it, or Paul might be using it, and so on. So it's a great way to connect the Old Testament with the New Testament.
That is so powerful. I love all of the interactive elements, and I assume because you said that maybe you're going to focus on a few more here in a moment. But
yeah, the New Testament use of the Old Testament is one. The other one that I really love for preachers is the Psalms and Proverbs Explorer. Proverbs Explorer is not as visual, but the Psalms Explorer, if you want to preach through Psalms, and since your audience is mostly preachers, this is a great tip, I think. One of the things that you can do is this interactive Psalms Explorer. First of all, they've created these cool little bubbles that float around, which I think are fascinating visually to begin with. But the power is in the ability to filter through this list, again, on the left-hand side. And for example, what if I wanted to preach a series of sermons from the Psalms on faith? Well, if I go down to themes and I click on faith, what it's going to do is it's going to filter this down, and it's going to show me all the Psalms that have an emphasis on faith. If I wanted to look at Psalms that have the theme worship, I can filter it down, and you can filter it by additional resources. So if I wanted to look at Psalms that were on worship, but only by David, it's going to keep filtering it down. And so I can eventually get to the point where I've got this limited set of Psalms that's very focused on themes and content that I want. And then if I see one of them that I want, for example, this little bubble is Psalm 22. I click on it. There's the Psalm. It can show me the parallelism. It can show me the structure. I can even match the Hebrew right next to it. And since Hebrew goes the opposite direction, it makes for a great layout. And I can look at the original language. I can look at the English, and I can break the Psalm down. And I can work on my Bible class or my sermon from a group of Psalms that are talking about worship.
Mm-hmm. That's wild. I have admittedly not used this, so the bubbles were new to me. This is fantastic.
Yeah, it really is crazy. And up in the upper left-hand corner, you have this little breadcrumb trail that you need to get used to in a lot of the tools in Logos now. And, if you just click on all, it wipes it all out and starts over. You can look at the Psalms by structure. You can see all the acrostic Psalms together, all the chiastic Psalms together. You can look at the Psalms by author, and the bubbles like refloat back together. You can sort them by genre of Psalms, the laments, the royal Psalms, the praise Psalms, the Thanksgiving Psalms, and so on. And so it's a great way for you to deal with a really large body of work. The Psalms is such a large body of work, but narrow it down to a focus for either a Bible class or a sermon series or any other kind of personal study that you want to do. And it really allows you to deal with this large corpus of information in some very cool ways.
And the animations are so satisfying.
There's
something about all those bubbles.
There is a cool factor. You got to admit that when people make things visually interesting, it's very neat.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, speaking of visually interesting interactives, there's another one that is called the Bible Books Explorer. And the Bible Books Explorer, when you first open it, seems pretty boring, but I will show you one particular feature of this. And at the top right, it's called Intertext. This is kind of like the Old Testament use of the New Testament, but it's visual. And what this is doing is it's showing every book of the Bible and all of its threads that are connected to other Bible books. And it does it in a very visual way. All of these threads connect through to each other. So again, if I want to study the Gospel of Mark, here are all of the citations related to the Gospel of Mark. I can click on all at the top of the interface and see even more connections. But if I click on that, it does a search and it's going to show me all of these verses. But the visual showing you the threads that connect all of Scripture together is another one of those very satisfying things. And it also shows us how interconnected the Bible is to each other. I mean, when you just look at this spider web of interlinks, it is one story that's interwoven together, and it's a visual way of assessing all of those connections.
Wow. Bible Books Explorer.
Right.
Very cool. All right. By the way, that was a wonderful segue that you did there to slip that other one in under the interactive elements. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah, the visuals are. I'm a former graphic designer, so anything that's visual gets my attention. My wife is kind of shiny. I chase shiny stuff because I'm a very visual guy.
Yes.
One more real quick. Just for the fun of it, there is a Proverbs Explorer that's like the Psalms Explorer. It's not as visual, but it's very powerful. But another one that I find very useful is Miracles of the Bible. And it's an interactive that, again, isn't quite as visual, but the power here is very cool. And basically, it's a list of every miracle in Scripture. Shows you at the top that there's 264 miracles listed in Scripture. And in the filtering menu along the left-hand side, you can filter by who performed the miracle, who the patient of the miracle was, who the miracle was performed on, what book it was in. Again, I teach the Gospel of Mark at Bear Valley, so I'm always interested in the Gospel of Mark. So if I go down to book, I can click on Mark. It filters it down and shows me that as many as 35 miracles appear in the Gospel of Mark. I can look at just the miracles that Jesus performed in a particular section. I can look at Old Testament miracles. I can look at miracles of healing, separate from miracles of exorcism. And if I click on the little expansion arrow, it gives me more information. And I've got a link that'll take me right to that text where the Bible's going to talk about that particular miracle. So especially if you're studying something like this, it's a great way to work your way through Scripture and see the miracles of the Bible. It's a great interactive.
I love those details too when you click the little arrow down, and it's got the same information that you can also filter it by, which is pretty cool.
Sure.
And that's all throughout Logos. It'll tell you who's speaking, to whom are they speaking, and so on, which is really, really neat.
It really is. There's another one much like this that is Israelite feasts and sacrifices. I don't know about you, but if you ever get lost in the Old Testament with all of the different sacrifices and feast days and what they were for and what the emblems were and which ones were sin offerings and which ones were guilt offerings and all of that kind of thing, there's a great interactive that walks you through all of that. And I find it really powerful as I'm studying the Gospels to see the background of some of those events in the Old Testament, even while I'm studying the New Testament. So interactives as a group has some really, really powerful features. And I know I cheated by including the whole group, but there's one that's the commandments of the law that breaks down the whole Mosaic law into prohibitions and things you're supposed to do and things you're not supposed to do, positive and negative laws, and you can filter it by all kinds of things as well. So there's a lot of power here. You just got to play with the interactives group that you find at the bottom of the tools menu.
Yeah, that is fantastic. It really is. There have been several times when I've accidentally stumbled upon the interactives, especially when I was first learning. And I kept, how do I get back to, I'm searching my media. How do I get back to that? It was all there in the toolbar all along. So.
Yeah, it's just at the bottom. You got to be willing to scroll all the way to the bottom. You can also find them, just so that you know, you can also find them in your library.
Yes.
If you just type in the word interactive in your library, it'll filter it down and give you all those interactives. But they've made them right there available for you in the tools menu, and that's the easiest place to play with them.
Yeah. And again, a wonderful testament to the fact this is software intended for preachers, which is just fantastic. I think about how long it would take to pull down different commentaries on Mark, for example, until you find just the one that has that table in the back of the book that shows you all the miracles in that account of the gospel. And that's time saved.
It really, when we talk about tools like this for preachers, I really think one of the things that gets talked about the most, when I go to PTP and other places, people know that I'm a big Logos user, and they immediately talk about the cost. And it is expensive. There's no doubt about it. So are fly rods and shotguns and other things that we do in our lives. Yeah. I'll just mention bass boats, those kinds of things. But the amount of time that this tool saves preachers so that they can be involved in ministry, not just looking stuff up in books, is massive. Over the course of a ministry's life, you're talking about weeks of time, possibly even years of time that no longer is spent searching for the books on your shelf to see if the information's in it. Now you can spend your time analyzing the information that is in those books and how the information is actually valuable rather than searching for the information. And that just changes everything.
Yeah, you're right. Those are good points. Okay, so we're ready for, I think, the fourth feature that you want to highlight today.
Okay, and that is the Concordance Tool. Under Tools, there is a tool called Concordance. Now, it figures there's been an update since class this morning, so mine's going to show generating. It's always the way, isn't it? That when you need the tool, it's going to be This is only going to take about a minute, so I can talk that long while it generates. But every time your library, something is added to your library, it needs to regenerate this tool. But what the Concordance tool does is exactly what you think it does. It creates a list of every word in a book. And it's not just a Bible tool. You can use this with any book in your Logos library, which is in effect creates an exhaustive concordance of any book that you own. Now, where this really comes in handy, and the way we use it at Bear Valley and the way I use it the most, is breaking down Bible books to find out what are the most frequently occurring words in a particular book. Exegetically, when you think about that concept, if an author uses a word over and over and over again throughout the letter, odds are he's telling you what that letter is about. I used to joke that when my kids were off at college, when I got emails or letters back in the day from them, and they needed money, guess what words appeared in that letter over and over again? After I love you, Dad, it was, I need money. I've got a bill to pay. There's words that are associated with that tell us what the message is about, right? Well, the Bible's no different. And so we have the opportunity to look at the language of a particular Bible book and break it down and get a list of the most frequently occurring words in that text. Now, that being said, of course, my computer is going to take forever while we're doing this. And 15 minutes before we started, this was working just fine. And I had been using it all morning to teach class. Now it's got to generate this report, which should be finished in just a second. But so how are you, Robert?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Yeah.
Life good where you are? And
we're just living the COVID life over here. You know how it goes. So the concordance is it's generating a concordance that's unique to the specific volumes that are in my library. Is that the way that's working?
It's exactly right.
Wow.
When we think of the old Strong's exhaustive concordance, right?
Yes.
Each concordance was developed based on the translation that you were looking at, but it includes every single word and every use of every single word in that book. Okay. Well, you can do that not only for the Bible, but for any volume in your library. Wow. If you have a volume on preaching, for example, you can run a concordance on that book that's on preaching, and maybe there's going to be a section on expository preaching, and he's used expository over and over again. Well, you can click on it and see every place throughout that book where he has talked about expository preaching specifically. So it's almost like it creates an index. There you go. Mine's finally finished.
All right.
I know you brought yours up, but that's okay.
No, I brought up that's the video from Logos website, the Concordance tutorial video. Yeah.
Right. And so you'll notice that when it opens, you've got a list, and I've got mine set to look up root words. And so again, I'm looking at the original underlying language, not the English. I can look at the original Greek, and I can look at all passages, or I can look at a particular book. For example, if I want to break down 2 Peter or 1 Peter, for example, is a great one. I look at 1 Peter. And then I want to look at all the nouns, verbs, and adjectives in 1 Peter. Notice what I get. I get a list of the most frequently occurring nouns, verbs, and adjectives. He uses the word God 39 times in this 5-chapter book. That's a pretty significant number of uses in 5 chapters, right? And we wouldn't be particularly surprised by the use of words like God and Christ, but look at the word suffer. In 1 Peter, he uses the word suffer 17 times. And if I click this little expansion arrow next to it, it shows me every place he uses it throughout 1 Peter. And he uses it in every chapter multiple times in every chapter, that tells us that this is a word that's helping us understand the meaning and the purpose behind Peter's letter.
Mm.
And I would argue that First Peter is really about our faith in the face of suffering. And it's because he uses suffer so many times throughout the text. So this concordance tool helps you figure out what words are being used over and over again, and they can help you draw out the key words and the themes that are in books because of the use of those words.
Wow. Now that is a powerful tool. There are other ways to get something like that, aren't there? I mean, not through the concordance. It seems like I've pulled up something like that, but it was almost accidental. I couldn't figure out how to get back there.
Yeah, there are places that you can pull it up, but we used to do this through a complex morphological search. As a matter of fact, if you have any listeners that have been to any of my PTP training events on logos years ago, I taught them how to do this, doing a morphological search where you had to use this cryptic at N or at V or at J to find all this stuff. And they've coalesced all of this into the concordance tool and then added the power to do this with any book in your Bible or any book in your library. If you go up into the upper right-hand corner where it's mentioning, I've got mine set to the New American Standard, but if I click on this, it's going to give me every book in my library.
Wow.
And I can generate a concordance for any book in any language, by the way. Even if it's a Greek text, it will create a detailed concordance of the frequently occurring words and where they occur in the language of that particular book. So really a great tool to understand these thread ideas or the emphasis of a particular book. What is the author talking about the most in this book? What words does he go back to over and over and over again? Well, those might tell you what his emphasis is in that book, and it would allow you to study through that book with that particular emphasis, whether it's a Bible book or a secular work.
Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. Fantastic. And that they've made that so much simpler. As
they really have. They've made it a lot more powerful and a lot simpler.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. The concordance is tool number 4. Where do we, there's pressure here. This is the number 5-1. I'm interested to see what else you've shoved out of the way to bring this one to the top.
This one is really the most powerful feature I think Logos has, and it's one I love, and I'll warn you now, it's one you have to learn to use, but it's called visual filters. And what visual filters allows you to do is it allows you to mark up your text in ways that you want based on the underlying language. I know that sounds complicated. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Mm-hmm. For example, I just opened my New American Standard here, and I want to look at Luke 22:31. I was there a minute ago, but I want to look at Luke 22:31, and this is a passage that many of us are familiar with, and you'll notice in my text, it says, Jesus is speaking to Peter, and he says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that you may not fail, and you, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. We look at this passage and we say, Jesus is talking to Peter, and he says to Peter that Satan has demanded to sift Peter like wheat. But if you'll notice my text, the word you here is underlined, and right next to it in parentheses, I have a PL. What that's telling me is that this is a plural you. This isn't a singular you. And I created this visual filter because this is a verse that I need that marked, because English you There should be a difference between you and y'all. Do you agree with that, Robert? From where
I
you
do.
are in your part of the country.
In South Carolina, there's a strong delineation between the two. Yes.
Absolutely. In every segment of our culture, there's a difference between you and y'all. Well, when we understand that this should be a y'all, it changes the whole meaning of this verse. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you all like wheat. But I have prayed for you specifically, that you, Peter, that your faith may not fail, and you, singular, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Satan has asked permission to sift them all like wheat, but Jesus is praying for Peter. Just having that marked is a very cool way of being able to be reminded of that underlying text and what it means. Now, I can get to it just by pointing to it. And if you notice, when I point to the verse at the bottom of that screen, it tells me what the underlying Greek is. And you'll notice at the bottom of my screen, it says pronoun, personal, single, second person, accusative, plural, right? It's a plural pronoun, not a singular. So it really should be y'all. And I can use that information to create these visual filters that then mark up the text. Does that make any sense, Robert?
Absolutely, yes. And that's powerful stuff. Making the visual filters is a little bit of a different booger for me. I went through the tutorials, as I mentioned, and I was able to, I like to have the imperative verbs in the Greek New Testament. For me, they come up in green because I don't really have anything else that's going to show up green.
Right.
And that's nice. I don't know that I could tell you how I did it, though, once it's done.
Do we have time to walk through it real quick?
Well, I do if you do.
I do. I'm good.
All right.
If you go up to your docs menu, and in the upper right-hand corner of the documents menu, you have a new button, and you can say, create a new visual filter. And that opens up this blank visual filter. It always opens these documents. When you create a new one of the things it does is it always opens an untitled whatever. Untitled passage list, untitled word list, in this case, untitled visual filter. And if you don't do anything about that, your library is going to be filled with untitled all kinds of stuff. So the very first thing I do is I say imperatives. Now, since you've already made an imperative one, I'm going to add to your list here, Robert. I'm going to teach you maybe something new. Okay. And we're going to call this one imperatives and participles.
Right.
Because, and I can't type, but in the original language, participles tell you how to accomplish the imperatives. Okay. And we'll see an example of that in just a second. So I want to mark the imperatives and I want to mark the participles. So in the box down here, I need to make sure that I've got three choices: basic, Bible, or morph. Since I'm looking at the original language, I always want morphological filtering. Okay. That's what morph means. And anytime you want to get to the Greek or the Hebrew, you're dealing, or the Aramaic, you're dealing with a morph search or a morph filter. Okay. So I'm going to click on morph. And then I just need to make sure that my search line is correct. So search all morph text, that's fine. In all passages, that's good. In all resources, that's fine. With Anderson Forbes Aramaic morphology, nope, that's not what I want, right? If I search for Greek verbs in Aramaic morphology, I'm going to have a problem. So I click on that and I just choose Logos Greek morphology. And now there's one key that I always have to remember that Logos is never going to tell you about, and it's the @ symbol, just like sending an email. So the very first key that you type in this box, in this filter, is the @ symbol. And as soon as you do, it brings up a list of the parts of speech. So imperatives are verbs. So I click on verb. And now it gives me all of these different kinds of verbs I can search for. and I just want imperatives under mood. So I'm going to search for verbs in the imperative mood. I don't care what tense or voice, so I leave those alone. And then all I have to do is click in the formatting window, and I'm going to make my imperatives blue. It presents you a list of highlighters. That's another feature of Logos. You can create all your own custom highlighters. We're not going to get there. It didn't make my top 5. But I'm going to make all my imperatives blue. And you'll notice as soon as I did that, look what happened in my New American Standard. All of those came up as blue. And I want to do the same thing, but I want to do it with participles. So if I click in the filter box and I start with the @ symbol, participles are also verbs. So I click on verbs, and under mood, you'll see that I have a participle, and I'm going to make my participles green. And you'll notice now I have participles. You see it? Okay. I am now finished with this filter, so I can close it at the top. And notice what happens. Those words stay highlighted. The advantage of visual filters is once you create them, you can turn them off and on as you want by this little, I call it the Cannonball Menu. It looks like 3 little stacked cannonballs, right?
Yes.
If you go to the little Cannonball Menu and you scroll down to the bottom, you have a list of visual filters. And as I scroll through my list, you can see all the visual filters that I have. But one of them now is called imperatives and participles. And if I turn it off, they go away. If I turn it on, they come back. So it's kind of like marking in your Bible, but being able to erase them and turn them back on, which is really very cool.
Well, and to your point at the top of the episode about how the Greek is underlying all of this, that filter applies in all your Bibles too, which is great.
Right. This is not an English-based filter. This is dealing with the original language, imperatives and participles. And so when I go to my verse, for example, let's go to Matthew 28. We'll go to the Great Commission. And look at what these imperatives and participles do here. Interesting. Oh, it's because I can't type. Go into all, therefore go and make disciples. Notice blue are my imperatives. What's the imperative in Matthew 19? It's not go. Sometimes we teach it that way, that the imperative is that we are to go, but going is actually a participle. And so while going, we are to make disciples. There's our command. How do we do that? By accomplishing the participles, by baptizing them and teaching them. How do you make a disciple? You baptize them and teach them to observe all that Jesus commanded. That's how you make a disciple. That's what Scripture says, how you make a disciple. And so throughout the text now, as we scroll through, preachers, you want a sermon? These participle strings tell you how to do this. Look at Colossians chapter 1, verses 9 through 12. This is one of my favorites. Paul says that he's been praying that they would be filled with the knowledge of his will. Notice verse 10, so that you will walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. Well, how do I walk this worthy walk, Paul? Bearing fruit in every good work, increasing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power, and giving thanks to the Father. That's what a worthy walk is, according to the text. And brothers, that'll preach. There's a 4-point sermon for you on the worthy walk out of Colossians chapter 1, verse 9, simply by using these visual filters to highlight the imperatives and the participles. And it's relatively easy to make. There's a little bit, like you said, it's a little booger to learn how to make these filters. But as you do, they become more and more powerful.
Yeah. And just to remember, too, that they're in your docs menu when you need them. And so you can go in and actually edit those as you need to if you want to tweak them a little or something.
Yep. If I want to go back to this one, if I want to change this, Now I can show you, I've created some custom highlighters. If I scroll down through my list of highlighters, I've created some highlighters that would actually mark these imperatives by putting the word imperative, IMP, above them. And my participles, I can actually put the word participle in above it. All of these are custom highlighters that I've created. And so it'll take just a second to update, but now it tells me that these are all participles. And I don't have to remember what the highlighting is telling me. Right. I can actually insert the words in the highlighter itself.
Yeah, there you go. It's like, I'm doing well to remember to double and triple click. So
I understand. And that's why we saved visual filters for the last.
Yeah.
But just know that you have these tools. And as I mentioned, you can mark all kinds of things. For example, we looked at the concordance. We were talking about keywords in a book. You'll notice that when I scroll through, I have converted all of those concordances into visual filters for keywords in a particular book.
Wow.
And so if I go to, for example, if I go to the book of James and I'm studying through James, I can actually turn on the keywords for James, and they're all highlighted throughout the text. And I can follow these threads of thought through the letter of James as I work through them and say, wait a minute, he's doing something with this word doer. He's been using it all over the place. And look, doer, 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 doer. This is about doing the word. And those filters can help me figure all that out. So visual filters can be an extremely powerful tool. Learning curve's a little steep. I get that. But if you search online, a lot of us share visual filters online. There's lots of places you can go.
Fantastic. Wow. This is exciting. So, I told you when during COVID, went through the tutorials, got all on fire about it. And of course, I've continued to try and use those and gone back to those tutorial videos a little bit. This is one of those episodes I'm going to be going back and re-listening to as well, especially watching you walk through some of those things. That's valuable stuff.
It's very cool. And one quick tip in that docs menu.
Yes.
You have at the top, you have yours, groups, and public. If you click on public, and you look at visual filters, there are 443 pre-made visual filters that nerds like me have created that are out there that you can download to do whatever you want. Notice there's one here that marks all the subjects, verbs, and direct and indirect objects in the original language. And so there's all kinds of visual filters here. So you don't necessarily have to learn to do them yourself. You can download them and break them down, and they can help you learn how to do them.
Okay, legit. Here's one. It's the third under visual filters on mine. It's the third one from the top, you versus y'all. We were just talking about this.
As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine that you know.
Yes, I see his name out to the side now.
Yeah, just made that one because he's taking my logos class right now. And so he made that one and posted it online.
Nice.
So that the students could download it.
Yes.
So yeah, and you can filter it by author. If you scroll through here, you're going to find my name and somewhere, and there's filters that I've uploaded, and there's filters other people have uploaded. But that makes using these filters maybe a little bit easier because you don't necessarily have to create them from scratch.
Absolutely. Wow.
I'm sorry, Robert. That was a sixth.
That was a bonus one.
Thing. I'm sorry. I broke the rules.
It's
I knew
okay.
I was going to.
You know what? It's just the top 5 sounds better as a title than like the top 6. So it's fine.
It's the top 5 with 4 additional tips. Let's just do it that way.
Yeah. And number 4 has 18 parts, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, brother, thank you so much for doing this. This has been so fantastic.
I love
today.
it. Yeah, I love this stuff. And every now and then, the folks at PTP invite me out, and I do this kind of stuff with logos at PTP. And so you mentioned at the beginning that you were hopeful. I know there's a lot of preachers in the Lord's church that use logos. And so I think this
Yes.
is really helpful. And I hope it's helpful at least. And if people want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to help.
Awesome. Wow. We appreciate your time today. And he mentioned a little earlier, he's been teaching this today at Bear Valley. It's just been a Logos day for you.
It has. It started at 8 o'clock this morning, and I've been going all day talking about logos.
Wow.
So I love it. It is a passion of mine because it's a tool that really helps us dig so much deeper into God's word. And any tool that can help us understand God's message to the world better and communicate it more effectively is worth our time. And so I love it for that and it massages my geek muscles as well.
That's right.
I used to do a podcast with a couple of guys called the Ministry Geek, and
Yes.
so that I think that kind of fits.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I love about this, and I need to stop, but what I love about this so much is, yes, the resources, the books, the digital books, but there are also so many filters and resources, customizable, as we've just shown, that are just dealing with the text itself. And it helps you just work in the text without having to consult any outside resources, which is powerful. Yeah.
And I really do think that's a major point. Don't buy logos don't get in love with the size of your library and logos. You can spend tens of thousands of dollars and have literally tens of thousands of books, but the tools that let you break down the text are available in most libraries, and they really are the heart and soul of this tool. You can add 50 more commentaries, but the ability to break the text down is really, I think, where the value is, and you don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Preachers in Training. I want to thank you so much for being a part of our episode today. And remember that there are brand new episodes that release every Thursday from thelightnetwork.tv or in wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Search for Preachers in Training. And on YouTube as well. And hit the subscribe button where applicable so you never miss an episode. Thank you again, brother, for your time today. It really means a lot to us.
Oh, thanks for the invite. Anytime.
And thank you for being a part of our episode today. Until next time, I'm Robert Hatfield. Let's go preach the word.